This is the Nations Conspire channel. Welcome to today's show. This video is going to be about a lot of different topics that tie together that you're going to find very, very interesting, including the Ark of the Covenant, the Third Temple, and Donald Trump and Elon Musk. Now, a lot of things keep me up at night. A lot of things go through my mind. There's a lot of things that I cover. Obviously, I do a lot of content because I'm always thinking about this stuff and I'm always trying to wake people up. And more I've been drawn to now leaning towards going to conservatives and trying to help them come out of what we're seeing, this deception. Whereas in the past, my main focus was pulling people out and seeing that Satanism is real, that Christianity is real, all these celebrities who are tied in with the Illuminati and the New World Order and the all-seeing eye symbolism and all those things. But recently I've just felt so overwhelmed with what I've seen with so many brothers and sisters in Christ who are being deceived. And most people out there look at that and they go, well, let them be deceived. Some say it's the separating of the wheat from the tares. Maybe so, but I still feel drawn, knowing everything I know about the CIA and mind control and all these operations and experiments that have been done and are being done. I feel so drawn more than ever to try and help brothers and sisters in Christ see that the left and right work together and that they are deliberately trying to deceive Christians right now with everything that's going on with Donald Trump. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the topics that I just mentioned, but I also want to note that I don't know who the Antichrist is just as much as everybody listening to this doesn't specifically know. Now, people will claim that they know. People will say this is the Antichrist. We know that there's a lot of Christians who get into heavy debates and spend all their time focusing on other Christians saying these people preach work-based salvation versus faith-based. There's all these other things that always happen, and I'm not trying to do that. Everybody's entitled to their opinion about who the Antichrist can be and what is going to happen moving forward. I'm giving you my opinion here. So obviously, I feel very, very concerned about what I'm seeing with Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and I'm having a lot of thoughts and dreams about Donald Trump actually being the Antichrist, which I never really thought too much about in the past. I've covered it in some videos. But to be honest with you, I never thought I'd be alive to see some of the things that are going on in today's world. And I thought I'd be long dead by now. And every single day, there's just more and more things that show us the signs of the times that we're living in and how much closer we're actually getting to the second coming of Christ. But obviously, things have to happen first. And some of those things, of course, revolve around the Antichrist, the Third Temple, and what we're seeing going on in today's world with peace coming in, global peace, right? We know the Antichrist is going to deceive people with promises of global peace. Sounds a little bit like what we're hearing with Donald Trump. He's going to gain worldwide control, which sounds insane, right? But think about all the stuff we've heard about since Donald Trump has become president-elect again. All these other countries are playing the role of bowing down to Trump and cheering for Trump. He's a popular leader around the world. It's not just in the United States of America. So the new temple, the Third Temple, has to be built at some point so that the second coming of Christ can occur. And there's a lot of weird things going on in Jerusalem, including these stories I'm about to show you about the Ark of the Covenant. But we all know about the red cows, the red heifers that are supposedly were brought in from Texas, that were brought over to Israel and are waiting. The red heifers obviously coincide with the building of the Third Temple. The other thing is the Dome of the Rock, because it's believed by a lot of people, including myself, that the Third Temple will be built after the destruction of the Dome of the Rock, and that location is where they will actually build the Third Temple. So the Dome of the Rock has to be destroyed first, and obviously with the conflict we see going on, it's very easy to see that eventually one of these days we're going to wake up and there's going to be a story about how Israel destroyed the Dome of the Rock and took it over, and Christians will be thrilled about it, not knowing at least that the Third Temple will be built there. And it seems like many Christians don't even know about the Third Temple and what is going to occur with the Antichrist. So the other thing going on over there is the Ark of the Covenant. If you haven't heard, there is a replica Ark of the Covenant that is going around Jerusalem. Why is this important? It's important for many reasons, including this bizarre thing with Donald Trump and Lago and having the Ark of the Covenant at Lago, which I'll get into in a second. But for those of you that don't know about the Ark of the Covenant, it's the sacred chest that held the stone tablets containing the 10 Commandments. The significance of the Ark of the Covenant was that it was the representation of God's presence on earth and was used as a method of communication, of course, between God and the Jewish people. It was believed to have certain powers. So the Ark of the Covenant, which is mentioned throughout the Old Testament, is mentioned in Joshua 3 and 2 Samuel chapter 6, verses 11 through 15, which describe the Ark of the Covenant staying in Edom's house for, I believe it was 3 months, and then David brought it to Jerusalem with him. In Exodus 28:16, it's described about how the tablets of the covenant were put in the ark. And then, of course, in Exodus chapter 25, verses 10 through 22, it describes what the ark is made of, what the ark looks like, the pure gold, and how specifically it was made. But keep in mind, as I tell you this about the Ark of the Covenant, keep in mind, obviously the Bible talks about how Uzzah touched the ark to steady the ark, and God instantly killed him, because touching of the covenant will result in death. So, that being said, there is a replica of the ark which is going around Jerusalem. The replica ark stopped in Jericho, the first Israeli city inhabited by Jews after the biblical exodus from Egypt. Also in Shiloh, the site that served as the Jewish capital for 369 years after the Jews settled in Israel, and the location of the tabernacle before the building of the first temple. Now, this replica ark has mystery around it, right? Who built this replica ark? Is it really a replica, or could it potentially be the real Ark of the Covenant, which has been this mystery on earth for a long time? Where is the Ark of the Covenant? Well, the Ark of the Covenant, is it real? Because most people say God isn't real, so the Ark of the Covenant doesn't really exist. But we'll get into that in a second, and the CIA's connection to the Ark of the Covenant, which is pretty crazy to actually see when I show you this documentation. But this replica ark has a very similar theme to it. It took 17 volunteers who live in several countries 3.5 years to build the replica ark, which is made out of donated gold and some 3 tons of Egyptian acacia, which I believe is a type of wood. And they say, according to Jake, quote unquote, Jake in parentheses, the project's chief architect, who prefers to remain anonymous, and Louis Topper, its principal financer. Does that sound familiar to you? So somebody made what probably could be valued at a lot of money, because there's a lot of gold used here in creating this replica, who has decided to remain anonymous, who is somehow getting this replica that they built, he built, and getting it put in Jerusalem, getting it put in Mar-a-Lago, but nobody knows who he is because he's remaining anonymous. Kind of reminds me of the Georgia Guidestones, right? How these Guidestones went up with the New World Order's 10 Commandments, which is really what was on the Georgia Guidestones. And of course, they tell us the guy's name was Robert C. Christian, but nobody knows who he was, even though it cost a lot of money to make, and clearly somebody could have followed a paper trail to find out who it really was. But we're just told it's Robert C. Christian, a.k.a. John Doe, a.k.a. George Glass. So, there is this replica of the Ark of the Covenant. And why is this very interesting? Well, there are some who believe that the Antichrist is going to sit on the Ark of the Covenant and declare himself to be God inside of the third temple. Now, that's just what some people believe. You might not specifically believe that, and that's perfectly fine. It's open for interpretation if you believe that the Ark of the Covenant is going to be in play here with the Antichrist or not. Why is this interesting? Well, this is interesting because about 8 months ago, and I saw this when it happened, and I didn't even know what I was looking at. But you may have seen some of these pictures that floated around social media. People like James O'Keefe from Project Veritas, the controlled alt-right media, was at Mar-a-Lago. There weren't many, I don't think there was any actual news stories about this. There was just pictures taken and put on their Instagram and Twitter accounts of these alt-right media figures standing in front of what looked like the Ark of the Covenant. And at the time, I was going to cover this because I was completely creeped out by it. I mean, we all knew that Trump was obsessed with gold. Obviously, there's the Apollo tie-in, the Orange Man. But having an Ark of the Covenant in Mar-a-Lago, well, that's very, very suspicious. This is the same exact Ark of the Covenant that is now in Jerusalem. So why was this sitting in Mar-a-Lago? And why did this get barely any news coverage? This wasn't discussed by many people. It was just sitting there and people were taking pictures with it. Nobody was thinking anything of it. Now, maybe most of these people didn't even realize what it was that they were standing in front of, but this is the replica that you're seeing of the Ark of the Covenant, and it was sitting inside of Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence for about 8 months. Now that is over in Jerusalem. So that brings me to Project Sunstreak. Now, some of you may remember recently I covered the Stargate project, talking about the CIA and portals and remote viewing, which is the practice of using the mind to gain information about a distant or unseen person. And while I was covering that, I came across Project Sunstreak, which is a lesser known offshoot of Project Stargate. If you don't know about this, you need to know now. And you can look it up for yourself. It's directly on the CIA's website. You can even find it through a Google search. The mission: access and desire the target identified by coordinates 781410/110121. See mission statement. Training target 0209 is the Ark of the Covenant. This is a CIA document, ladies and gentlemen. This is your government, okay? We're talking about the Bible and the government. So for anybody out there who thinks that the Bible is fiction, these are things that you should be saying to yourself: why is the government searching for the Ark of the Covenant? Goes on to say, attained excellent sight contact, doing very well with stage 4 structure. Viewer also exhibited the ability to keep all to a minimum. Have to be careful with editing, though. This does seem to be a problem at this time. Just something to watch for. Then you go into this document right here. Again, from the government's website. Target is a container. This container has another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver. The target is similar in shape to a coffin and is decorated with seraphim. This target is located anywhere in the Middle East, as the language spoken by individuals present seem to be Arabic. Visuals of surrounding buildings indicated the presence of most domes. Individuals in the area were clothed in virtually all white, had black hair and dark eyes. One figure I homed in on wore a mustache. The target is hidden underground, dark and wet, where all aspects of the location of the target. The purpose of the target is to bring people together. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, the resurrection. There is an aspect of spirituality, information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we now know. The target is protected by entities. This is a government document, ladies and gentlemen. The target is protected by entities and can only be opened by those who are authorized to do so. This container cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. Once it is time to open the container, the mechanics of the lock system will be found to be fairly simple. Individuals opening the container by prying or striking are destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us. So you might say, what am I hearing here? You're hearing about the government documenting the existence of the Ark of the Covenant. This that you're hearing, what you're hearing is a branch off of that Operation Stargate, that remote viewing operation that the government did. Through doing that, using remote viewing, which really is, forms of witchcraft that the government is using, they were able to locate the whereabouts of the Ark of the Covenant. Now, this is documented by the government. So you might say, okay, what are you getting at? What I'm getting at is potentially, obviously, the government finding the Ark of the Covenant and keeping this hidden from humanity. And possibly this replica maybe not even being a replica in the first place, or maybe being a replica that's going to get swapped out at some point by the real Ark of the Covenant. It's very convenient that this is all of the stuff in this 1988 document talks about this being located over in the Middle East. And you would think if the government found out through remote viewing, which they clearly really believe in because it's very documented throughout the government with a lot of the projects like Project Stargate that they openly have documented and discussed, just like all the other stuff we talk about with weather modification, that they would likely have tried to seize the Ark of the Covenant if possible. Now, I said earlier that anyone who touched the Ark of the Covenant would be struck dead. So that makes me think that possibly it is a replica, but maybe they plan on swapping it out and putting it inside of that third temple. So you might say, well, if they found the Ark of the Covenant, why would they keep it hidden? Why wouldn't they tell people about this? Well, it's the same reason they keep everything that's biblical hidden. There's stories and there's obviously documentation of Noah's Ark being found. Archaeologists like Ron Wyatt have claimed to have discovered the locations of a lot of these things. Sodom and Gomorrah believed to be in Saudi Arabia, right? Well, why would the government come out and tell you the existence of God? The government wants to be God. They're trying to play God. That's why they created things like atheism. So they're not going to admit to the existence of finding the Ark of the Covenant, because then what would happen? If the government came out on television and said, we found the Ark of the Covenant, look, and you can't touch it, you'll die on the spot. Wouldn't the entire world wake up to what's going on? Wouldn't the entire world convert to follow Yahweh, follow our Father in heaven? All these other deity religions, wouldn't they all convert? And suddenly people find salvation through Christ, because once they realize the Bible's real, they've realized salvation could only be obtained through Christ. Wouldn't that really just bring an ultimate universal saving to humanity? So they would never tell you if they found the Ark of the Covenant or not. But it's interesting to note that there's government documentation linked to Operation Stargate that talks about the locating of the Ark of the Covenant. I find it very weird in many different ways. You could take out, look, I'm not saying that the Ark of the Covenant that they're rolling around Jerusalem is the real Ark of the Covenant, because obviously I don't know how they'd be able to touch it and not be, die on the spot, right? According to what the Bible tells us. But there could be something to it with swapping it out at some point in time, because remember, it is believed that the Antichrist might use the Ark of the Covenant as his throne inside of the third temple. But overall, what I'm getting at with this is just the tie-in with the Ark of the Covenant in general being at Mar-a-Lago, and the same one now being in Jerusalem. And who is going to be the face of peace over there? Who is the one who's claiming he's going to bring peace and end the war with Russia and Ukraine and end the conflict going on in Israel? Donald Trump is claiming all of these things, and he's claiming pretty much, as you can see, he's luring Christians into siding with the synagogue of Satan, the military state of Israel, which is the current state of Israel, which literally is an industrial military compound. That's our complex. That's what it is. Okay? And Christians don't know how to interpret that. They're not interpreting it the right way, clearly. So ever since the assassination attempts and watching how people have responded, it's really just been keeping me up watching other Christians that I know who are good Christians, who are falling for this stuff and don't understand where I'm coming from. And I look at myself and say, is it just me? And it's not just me. Because if you understand psychological ops, you realize that the way that the media portrayed Trump was by design. Them going, look at the media. They're just constantly doing this. Well, how else do you build a martyr? If Trump just was out there and everyone was like, he's the best, people would be like, I don't know if he's the best. And him coming out after all this, getting martyred, and all of a sudden declaring that God saved his life with divine intervention, that the bullet just missed by an inch, he would have been dead. And everybody suddenly got sucked into this psychosis. So can't you see some of these signs where even he has the Ark of the Covenant inside of Mar-a-Lago, a replica, so to speak, of the Ark of the Covenant, and Christians aren't saying, well, that's weird, that's blasphemy, when there's lots of signs around Donald Trump and Elon Musk potentially being the Antichrist and the false prophet. There's lots of signs, because when we talk about miracles, right, the Bible talks about the Antichrist performing miracles. Well, what do you think all this technology is that Elon Musk has? How would you define a miracle? I mean, I just covered how Neuralink is literally talking about having the ability to let the blind see by having the Neuralink implant inside of their bodies, right? All of a sudden they can see. People who were disabled can now walk. Does it sound a lot like the miracles in the Bible where Christ healed the sick and cured the blind? Sounds a lot like it. So there are lots of things to keep our eyes on moving forward. Like I mentioned, the red heifers are waiting over there, right? Really, if you hear a story and you wake up and hear a story about the Dome of the Rock being destroyed, then we're going to start hearing stories about the third temple being built there. Well, they're already talking about the building of the third temple. And the reason that there's some stories out there about the third temple that some mainstream media is actually talking about is they're preparing you for the building of the third temple. I don't know if Christians actually understand what this means. I know that they hear the building of a third temple and they're thinking to themselves, well, the return of Christ. But are they missing out on the Antichrist aspect of all of this and being actually deceived? And how could you not see, when you read all of the qualities and traits of the Antichrist, Donald Trump? You can't see Donald Trump declaring himself God, sitting in that third temple in Jerusalem. He's already called himself the chosen one. He's already read you that snake poem where he talks about, it was me and you knew who I was from the beginning and you let me in. So There's lots of things out there. I wanted to cover this because I had seen recently, again, the story about how this Ark replica was going around. And I had remembered those stories from months ago with the alt-right media seeing that Ark of the Covenant inside of Mar-a-Lago, taking pictures in front of it. And now more and more with all these stories about Trump and the heroism, and then seeing how the world is reacting to Donald Trump, not just America. It's around the world. There's billboards in other countries. All of the world leaders are coming out praising Donald Trump. These are all stories that are out there that are formulating in people's minds what they're hearing, and they're thinking, oh, all the other countries are backing off America now. All the other countries are bowing down to Donald Trump. It starts making you think of a world leader on a world stage. Then the conflict, of course, that we know is going to continue to occur with Iran and Israel, and how Albert Pike in his blueprint for World War III talked about this. And Donald Trump is prepared, obviously, to mislead Christians into siding with the synagogue of Satan themselves during all of this. And most of them don't have a clue about what's actually going on because they think that they're awake and they're not under mind control. When I show you clips of the mainstream media telling you that divine intervention saved Donald Trump, it's no different than showing you the Sinclair Broadcasting Group telling you over and over again the same exact talking points, right? Threat to our democracy. Everyone's seen it a million times. Oh, look, the media, it's all the same script. They're using the same scripts with Trump and convincing you of all these things about Trump being saved and anointed by God to save America. There's a great deception at play here. So I just wanted to cover that. I found it very interesting just seeing how this ark just happens to be over in Israel now, and they waited until recently to bring it over there, that it was sitting in Mar-a-Lago. There's no such things as coincidences in this world. And of course, the CIA documentation talking about through Project Stargate, how through remote viewing, they actually documented this. They documented this on the CIA's website, what they called Project Sunstreak. And if the government's documenting this and they believe that the remote viewing is real, which clearly they do, and then they're telling you that they found the location of the Ark of the Covenant, you think that the government would just be like, oh, we found the Ark of the Covenant, let's move on to something else. You don't think that they would try to get to the Ark of the Covenant? You don't think they'd suddenly be bombing the Middle East to discover the Ark of the Covenant and its whereabouts so that they could take the Ark of the Covenant? Now, I don't know how they would touch the Ark of the Covenant. That's beyond my, realm of capability. Or if they've just found it, located it, and are, covering it up. They have a military base built around it is the likely scenario because God is in control. And if, you're not allowed to touch the Ark and you'll die from touching the Ark, then I'm sure that none of them are touching the Ark, but they're clearly protecting it. They have something planned here, something big, I believe. I thank everybody for being here. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. God bless all of you as always and your families.